Now I'm probably going to cop it in the comments for what I'm about to do, because in this video I'm going to be smoking this Wagyu brisket hot and fast. So for this cook we're going to be using our drum smoker. We'll set this up first, so we'll open our lid, we'll take our cooking grate off, then we can remove our heat deflector, then we'll fill our charcoal basket up with briquettes, bury a firelighter in there and light that up. And now we've got about 15 to 20 minutes before our briquettes are going to be ready, so we'll use that time to trim and prepare our brisket. I'm going to be using a beautiful Kiwami Wagyu brisket, and I'm going to get started by removing this top flap. And I want to do this in a way that I maintain a nice aerodynamic shape, so I don't want to scoop too low into taking this top flap off. I want to be trimming this brisket in a way that any juices are just going to run off it instead of pooling up. And now I'm just going to work on taking off any hard fat. I want to trim that down to around 2 to 3 mil in thickness. And don't throw any of your trimmings away. Any hard white fat we can render down to make beef tallow, and then any of the meatier stuff we can trim down to around 80% lean meat to 20% fat, which makes the perfect burger mince. And any dangly thin edges I'm just going to square up as well. And right at the point end of our brisket we've just got a massive pocket of fat here. I'm just going to trim that completely off. As you can see in this middle section, that was just fat the whole way through. That never would have rendered down, so we're just best to get rid of it. And I've just squared up the thin end on our flat side. Look how much intramuscular fat is in there. This is going to be a great brisket, and I'm pretty happy with the top. So let's flip it over. And this bottom section really isn't going to need much. We'll just get rid of any excess fat and silver skin. Now, if this was a leaner brisket, I'd leave some of this bottom fat on, but with Wagyu, you can definitely afford to trim more off. But as always, if you're unsure, it's just best to leave more on than to take more off. All right, now I'm happy with this brisket. I've been trimming it in a way that it's even, aerodynamic, and that way it's going to cook much more even. Whenever I'm looking for a brisket, I try to look for one with a nice thick flat. The point's always going to be thicker, but the more even in shape you can get your flat to the point, you're going to get a much more even and easier cook out of your brisket. And now our brisket's all trimmed up, we can season it. First, I'm just going to give it a light coat in some yellow mustard to help our seasoning stick to the meat. Then you can go ahead and give the brisket a nice coating in your favorite rub. I'm just going to be using some of our beef bounce. And now our brisket's all seasoned up, let's check on our smoker. And as you can see, our briquettes are burning nicely. So we'll shut our lid, open up both of our vents, and we'll let our barbecue come up to temperature, which for this cook, we're going to be doing it at around 350 Fahrenheit or 175 Celsius. All right, so we are up to temperature, and now it's time to get some smoking wood on. I'm going to go with a couple of chunks of bourbon barrel oak, but if you've got other favorites, feel free to use that. So I'm just getting one chunk straight on the fire and then another chunk just off. And now we can get our heat deflector back in, then we'll get our cooking grate back on, followed by our beautiful brisket. Then we'll shut our lid and let that smoke away. So with this being a hot and fast cook, I don't want either side of our brisket to burn. So to prevent that from happening, I'm just going to flip our brisket every 60 minutes. And that way we'll get a nice even cook without it burning, and we'll get a nice even bark as well. All right, so our brisket's been going for a little over an hour. And if you're following along to this video, or you need to move anything around in your barbecue, what I recommend doing so you don't burn your hands is putting some gardening gloves on, and put your disposable gloves on over the top. And now we can flip this brisket without burning our hands. And as we look at our brisket, I can see that this side is much darker than this side. That's because at the back is the hotter part of our barbecue where all the heat is escaping through our lid vent. So next time we flip our brisket, I'm going to rotate it as well. So let's shut our lid and let this keep going. All right, our brisket's been going for a little over 3 hours now, and after flipping our brisket after the first hour, I've been flipping it every 45 minutes. So let's open this up and have a look. Now this is ready to wrap, and so we can see it better, let's bring it over to our chopping board. And as you can see, that bark looks absolutely incredible. Anyone would think this has been smoking away for 6 to 8 hours to get a bark like that. But before we wrap our brisket up, I just want to bring our temperature down a little bit more towards that 300 Fahrenheit or 150 Celsius. And that way, at a slightly lower temperature, still quite hot and fast at 300 Fahrenheit or 150 Celsius, we're just going to prevent that crust building up too hard on the bottom of our brisket. But for now, I'm just going to pour over some Wagyu beef tallow from our off trim, which I've been rendering down in a pot inside. And now we'll wrap our brisket nice and tight in a few layers of good quality foil. And now this can go back in the smoker. And actually, while we're here, before we close our lid, for anyone interested, I'm just going to show you what our internal temperature is. We're at about 65 degrees Celsius or around 148 Fahrenheit, which is a good internal temperature to wrap your briskets if your bark has set anyway. So we'll close our foil up, shut our lid, and let that brisket keep going. So with hot and fast briskets, you want to be very careful before the wrap stage, especially as that fat starts to render, because when you're flipping them, you're potentially going to cause a flare up. So just be mindful of it, wear some high heat gloves, and if you notice any pulling up of rendered fat on top of your brisket, maybe let that drain off into a tray before you flip it. Or you can use some drip trays throughout the cook, which will help prevent any flare-ups as well. But for now, our brisket's all wrapped up nice and tight, so what we're going to do is just let it go until it's probing tender around that 205 Fahrenheit or 96 degrees Celsius internal mark, which I reckon will only take another 2 hours or so. All right, our brisket's been wrapped up for about an hour. I've just checked on it and our point end is at around 80 degrees Celsius internally, whilst our flat is around 90 degrees Celsius. That's completely normal as our flat is much thinner than the point. So what I'll do is I'll unwrap the top of our foil on the flat side whilst keeping our point end wrapped up so that can catch up. And I'll chuck an extra bit of foil on just to help it speed up as well. Then we'll shut our lid and I reckon this will be done in the next hour. All right, and a little bit over another hour later, so that puts us around 5.5 hours into this cook. Let's have another check because I reckon this will be done. That is probing very nicely and we're right around that 96 Celsius or 205 Fahrenheit internal. Just want to make sure it's probing just as nice all over. Our flat's at around 94, but that is probing very soft. I'm actually super happy with how that's feeling, so we're going to carefully lift this out and onto a tray, and then I'll let this steam off for 5 minutes just to stop that cooking process. Then we'll cover it back over with foil and let it rest for a few hours. All right, and after a good rest, let's slice this up. So we've got our point on this side, our flat on this side. Let's cut it straight in half. That is an unbelievably juicy brisket. So I'm just going to keep slicing our flat in the same direction we sliced our brisket in half. And look at that. Even right to the end of the flat, still nice and juicy. So I reckon I might take 1 or 2 slices more off of this section. And then we've got the point running over here. So what we're going to do is just turn our brisket around and take a few slices off this way. And this is where you get what I think are the best slices on the brisket. So we'll go back to slicing that and we'll keep slicing through until we've pretty much run out of point muscle. And as you can see, we've only got a little bit of point muscle left. So what I like to do is you can just follow that seam, knock out any of that excess fat, and then slice that part into some burnt ends. And the piece we have left is all flat muscle, so turn that back to the same way you were slicing the flat and continue slicing that through. And that is how you slice brisket. We've got our flat here, point there, the rest of the flat there, and some burnt ends here. Let's have a taste. So this looks absolutely incredible. I'm so keen to try the taste and the texture. Let's cut a piece from the flat. Wow. For a brisket cooked, rested, sliced, and served all within 8 hours, that is unbelievable. Try a burnt end. Honestly, that is a phenomenal brisket. This is actually up there with some of the best brisket I've smoked. So the cook time for this brisket was around 5.5 hours. We rested it for around 2 hours, so 7.5 hours total with the cook and the rest. And it started out as around an 8 kilo brisket, but by the time we trimmed it, I reckon it would have been 6, maybe 6.5 kilos. I'll definitely be doing more hot and fast briskets like that. So if you enjoyed this video and don't want to miss our next ones, make sure you've subscribed to our channel. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to ask them in the comments below. But for now, that's the end of the video. So thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.